My name is Aaron Burke. I'm a professor of archaeology, Near Eastern archaeology in the Near Eastern Languages and Cultures Department, and I'm representing the 5th satrapy today. I would like to introduce our speakers. We will have 3 speakers in the second half of panel 1 today. Our first speaker is Gonzalo Rubio from Pennsylvania State University, Penn State University. He is professor of classics and Mediterranean studies there, and he will be presenting on axial anxieties, the politics and theology of temple destruction in the Achaemenid Empire and the ancient Near East.
Thanks so much. Thanks to the Purdabut Center, to our host, particularly Rahim Shayegan, and to Marissa Stevens for all. Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry for the long and pretentious title. Axial anxieties, of course, is hinting at the old notion from Karl Jaspers, 100 years old now, about the Axial Age. The focus of, sorry, I have to turn. Magically, gadgets don't work if you don't turn it on. The focus of the talk is the so-called daivā inscription of Xerxes, XPH, which is preserved in 4 limestone tablets from Persepolis, 2 in Old Persian, 1 in Elamite, and 1 in Babylonian, as well as an Old Persian duplicate from Pasargadae, precisely from Tali-Taht, the throne tale. The 4 Persepolis tablets, they're all 50 by 50 centimeters, more or less, 52, 53, and about 10 centimeters thick. The 4 Persepolis tablets were found alongside other 3 foundation slabs that are duplicates of the so-called harem text of Xerxes, XPF, and they were found in the southeast terrace in the garrison quarter. You have it marked there. They seem to have never been used or displayed. They were, in this case, the ones in Persepolis, they were used to provide the back for a mud brick bench. And we'll explain why this is pretty clearly the case, that they were never used or displayed because of matters of spelling and idiosyncrasies of the text. This is the Old Persian version that is complete. There are 2 Old Persian versions from Persepolis. One is incomplete. This is complete. This is the Babylonian version. This is the Elamite version, which is quite damaged, as you can see there. And this is the incomplete Babylonian version from Persepolis. As you can tell, the last line copied by or engraved by the mason is stopped in the middle. But notice that the mason started from the right to the left, meaning clearly the mason didn't know what he was engraving at all. The mason was certainly illiterate, though, I like to make a point that this could be an example of what Xerxes coined as alloglotography, and which I have tried to resuscitate to a relative failure. This is if the slabs from Persepolis come from a secondary find spot. The one from Pasargadae would come from a tertiary find spot because it's covering a drain. You have it there as it was found, the location in Tali-Taht. The tablet is seriously damaged. It's missing an entire corner. It's very scratched because, of course, it was used as construction material to cover a drain. So what is so interesting about the daivā inscription to have focused or the efforts of quite a number of individuals who have written about it in one way, directly or indirectly? Let's read the core of it. Proclaims Xerxes, the king, by Ahuramazdá's favor, these are the countries whose king I was outside Persia. I ruled them. They brought me tribute. What was said to them by me, that they did. The law, datam, that was mine. That law held them stable. Media, Elam, Arachosia, Armenia, Drangiana, Parthia, Areia, Bactria, Sogdiana, Horashmia, Babylonia, Assyria, Satagidia, Lydia, Egypt, the Ionians who dwell by the sea, and those who dwell beyond the sea, the Makkah people, Arabia, Gandhara, the Indus, Cappadocia, Dahae, the Scythians who drink hauma, the Scythians who wear pointed hats, Thrace, the Akaufaka people, Libyans, Carians, Nubians, proclaimed Xerxes the king, when I became king, there was among those lands that are described above one that was in turmoil, Ayauda. Afterwards, Ahuramazdā brought me aid, Upastan, by the favor of Ahuramazdā, that land I defeated. Notice he never mentions the land. That land I defeated and put it in its proper place, back in its place. And among those lands, there was one, again unnamed, where the daivā were worshipped. Afterwards, by the favor of Ahuramazdā, that place of the daivā, daivadānam, I destroy, Vijakanam. I proclaim the daivā should not be worshipped any longer. Where previously the daivā were worshipped, now there I worship Ahuramazdā at the proper time and with the proper ritual. And this expression, Artaza Bratsmanija, has many different interpretations, so that's one possible translation. And there was another matter as well that had been done badly or wrongly, which I made good. What matter is that? It's never mentioned. That which I have done by the favor of Ahuramazdā. Ahuramazdā brought me aid until I have done the job, until I had done the work. Who are these daivā whose places of worship are being described? It's very easy to fall back on what you could call etymological fallacy, not that etymologies are fallacious, but rather that to rely exclusively on cognates is not the best way to discern the actual meaning of a word in context. As you know, this is clearly the root in the European languages for the term for deity, male deity, female deity. In the Indo-Iranian languages, it's perfectly well attested. In the case of Iranian languages, there may be an evolution in which earlier on it just was a term for gods. Very quickly, by the time of the Gatha and the early Avesta, it became the false gods, the gods that have been abandoned and replaced with the worship of Ahuramazdā. And certainly by the time of Middle Persian, Middle Iranian Zoroastrian texts and in Modern Persian, it's just a word for demon. So if you want to simplify it in terms of axial terminology, this would show this nice and certainly very reductionist evolutionary pattern from polytheism, henotheism to monotheism, but we all know that that's oversimplifies how things are actually. Since I just mentioned the Avesta, who are the daivā in the Avesta? This is a section from the Gatha, Yasna 32, the first stanza. This is a 3-verse stanza, and I'm going to just try to provide a translation of something that is very, every single translation is different. The first and the third verse of the first stanza. You can compare the translations, Humbach, Kellen-Saint-Pirard, the late Stanley Isler, and Lecoq, etc. There is a recent monograph by Amir Ahmadi on the cult of the daivā, which translates many of these passages. Again, his translation is mostly a kind of consensus of all the pre-existing ones. The family, the clan, along with the tribe, and the daivā, in my recitation, that's Humbach's idea. The translation by Kellen-Saint-Pirard is to my great irritation. So it's just, or you could translate very literally, in my mind, or something like that. Ask for the favor that Ahuramazdā grants. Let us be your messengers. Keep holding back those who are hostile to you. But you, all the daivā, are the offspring of evil thought, and so is the leader who worships you. And also the offspring of evil thought, also the offspring of deceit and contempt, for which you have become notorious on the seventh of the world, or the seventh part of the world. Earlier on, I mentioned that the secondary find spot of the daivā inscription of Xerxes is well explained by the actual content of the inscription. As Rüdiger Schmidt listed in an article in 2000, the inscription is full of idiosyncrasies, mistakes, oddities. In fact, of all descriptions in the Old Persian corpus, the one that is the closest to XP8, to the daivā inscription, would be the one on the tomb of Darius, DNA, in Naksh Rustam. And even so, there the oddities are essentially different spelling choices. Here, the oddities oftentimes pertain to grammar and sometimes even to unusual things like the creation of a new A sign that has only one vertical instead of three verticals to write ka. Sherbo has speculated that this could be a short A, but I don't think if the Mason is illiterate, how an illiterate person comes up with it doesn't make much sense to me. I think it's just a graphic analogy with the signs for D with two verticals, the sign for A with three verticals, so you need one with a single vertical which doesn't exist, so you make one up. The entire inscription is so riddled with mistakes and things that make no grammatical sense. And certainly the spellings are not within what is expected in the corpus, that Schmidt concluded that it was never displayed. But what is interesting is that the three Old Persian versions we have, the two from Persepolis, one incomplete, and the one from Pasargadae, are identical. They all have the same mistakes. They all have the same split in lines. They are absolutely identical. They are xeroxes one of the other. Okay? There is absolutely no difference between any of them. So, if we buy into the content of the inscription, what did Xerxes destroy? Well, it has been proposed that it could be a place in Babylonia, a place in Bactria, a place in Media, in Egypt, in Athens. More recently, Witzel has proposed that it could be somewhere in Arachosia or in Chakra, because essentially Middle Iranian Zoroastrian texts talk about Arachosia using burials and Chakra using cremations, and you can still see the remnants of pre-Buddhist stupa, these burial mounds in the area in Afghanistan. But it's pretty clear that this is an inscription that has a very vague wording on purpose. There is the use of a trope that has been deployed for centuries before Xerxes to demarcate and articulate hegemonic discourses in the ancient areas, discourses that materialize often with the behavior of temple destruction. In the case of Xerxes, the lack of specifics, the lack of any names, seems that pertains to empty rhetoric and just the repetition of a topos without actually fleshing it out with actual actions of any kind. The topos of temple destruction, where they make a desert, they call it peace, as Tacitus puts in those words he attributes to the Caledonian chieftain in Agricola. We have quite a number of first-millennium temple destructions. The most famous one, of course, Nebuchadnezzar in the temple in Jerusalem. But I'm going to refer only to the ones that are known to us from direct sources, from annals or royal inscriptions that date to the kings who were the destroyers themselves, who are Sargon's letter to Assur concerning Urartu, Sennacherib's destruction in Babylon, and Assurbanipal in Susa. That's a photograph of the Louvre manuscript of the letter of Sargon to Assur, which is a kind of conceit for Assyrian kings to address the king as if it were a personal letter. And in this case, he narrates the 8th campaign of his kingdom against the land of Urartu. I set on fire, like a brush pile, Abrish, the harvest, sustenance of his people, and the hay, life of his people, the life of his herds. And I brought devastation to his meadows. The temple of Chaldea is the god of kinship in Urartu. His god I set on fire like a brush pile, again, the same terminology. And I destroyed his shrine. His Sagu can be translated almost with the concept of Santa Santorum, is the inside of the chapel. Since Urzana, the king, their prince, did not respect the command of Assur and has thrown off the yoke of my rule and forgot to serve me, I organized the deportation of the people of the city and ordered that Chaldea, the protector of Urartu, be removed. Notice that if you go back to the table, all these temple destructions end in massive human deportation. All of them. And there is a difference between destroying the temple and kidnapping the gods, what has been called godnapping. That's a very, very different phenomena. This is the inscription of inscription of Sennacherib at Babian, which that's the layers, the nice drawing, which refers to the destruction of Babylon. Of course, Babylon is not destroyed. He just vandalizes the city. I destroyed, devastated, and burnt with fire 3 times. For an Assyrian, nothing can be an overkill. I destroyed, devastated, and burned with fire the city and its buildings, from its foundations to its crenellation, from head to toe. I tore out the bricks and earth as much as there was, from the inner and outer wall and the temples and the ziggurat, and threw it into the Urartu River. Into the center of that city, I dug canals and flooded their site with water. I destroyed the structure of its foundations. I made its devastation greater than that of the flood, so that in future days, the ground of that city and its temples would be unrecognizable. In water, I dissolved. The verb in Babylonian, soharmutu, means melting wax, melting solids. I turned Babylon into a meadow. Finally, we have a destruction that is part of a family business, if you will. This is a kind of a first-millennium Sopranos saga. Assurbanipal, that's the Rasan prism of the annals of Assurbanipal. Assurbanipal attacks Susa because, of course, his brother, Shamash-shumukin, has been crowned king of Babylon. And, if there is nothing like fraternal love, there is nothing like fraternal hatred. So Assurbanipal pursues his brother Shamash-shumukin into the city of Susa that provided shelter for him, and it wasn't enough to kill his brother, which of course he was going to do no matter what. But he also vandalizes the city, destroys the ziggurat at Susa, and that's what Assyrians do so well. The ziggurat of Susa, which had been constructed with baked bricks colored with lapis lazuli, I destroyed. I stripped off its decorative horns, which had been cast in shiny copper. It's very important that the copper be shiny. As I mentioned earlier, there's a huge difference between temple destruction and god napping. Shanat Zaya published in the Journal of Ancient Near Eastern Studies, the Journal of Ancient Near Eastern History, now there are so many that start with the same 4 words, in 2015, and a very interesting article about the topos of god napping, taking away the gods. It's a very different thing. When you take away the gods, you are trying to submit these enemy lands, and you eventually return them. So it's essentially a way to exert your influence on enemies. However, the destruction of temples in foreign lands is, first of all, a propagandistic device for your own people and for your own nation or country or whatever you want to call it, for your own kingdom. Essentially, it's a way to articulate a discourse of hegemony, or if you want to call it just simply ideological supremacy over all the other peoples around it. Of course, it results with the absolute utter destruction of the enemy, since not only most of the cities are destroyed or partly destroyed, but the population is deported. Large numbers of deportees are moved around. But Xerxes is not only putting himself in a tradition, that's kind of a joke for those of you who may be fans of a TV show, Shtisel, about the Haredi family. There is an uncle called, if any of you watches Hebrew language TV, there is an uncle called Nuchem, who ends every sentence, absolutely every sentence, with Reshaim Ahurim, which means damned evildoers. Context or no context. He may be ordering coffee and he ends up saying Reshaim Ahurim, damned evildoers. And essentially, this is a way to put the Xerxes daivā inscription not only in its ancient Eastern context, but also in an Achaemenid context, in kind of, you want to call it Oedipal conflict with Papa Darius. Darius, at the beginning of the Byzantine inscription, restores places of worship that had been apparently, allegedly destroyed by Gaumata. As they were before, so I made the places of worship, daivadāna, that Gaumata the Magus had destroyed. I restored to the people the pastures, the cattle, the household slaves, and the houses that Gaumata the Magus had taken from them. But to the end of the Byzantine inscription, Darius is confronting the Elamites who don't worship Ahuramazdā. Proclaims Darius the king, those Elamites were disloyal, Arika, and by then Ahuramazdā was not worshipped. I worshipped Ahuramazdā by the favor of Ahuramazdā, as was my wish, so I treated them. And that's a very ominous way of phrasing things. Darius is able to name the target. Xerxes doesn't. He's not able to do it because he has no target. He's just repeating a topos, which explains that the inscriptions were never displayed and were discarded right away because they contain no content. They only contain the repetition of a rhetorical topos. The power of tradition surfaces in many places. This is a winery in Napa Valley. In this Napa Valley, Jerry Cooper sent it to me thinking it was very cute. That is cute. I'm sure the wine is very good. Napa, this winery is resorting to, it's actually every phrase, it's made up, but every word is in the Visitum inscription, but it's made up. That sentence doesn't occur in no inscription from the Achaemenid corpus. In the case of not so much the winery at Napa, but in the case of Xerxes, which may well have a connection, by placing himself in a specific tradition that used temple destruction as a trope of hegemonic discourses and endeavors, Xerxes is recycling that very topos without providing actual content. No targets, no temples are ever named. In Xerxes, this has become simply empty rhetoric. Thank you very much.